Okay, we are ready to begin. Welcome, and we are on we are live. So welcome. Good evening, and continuing with our halacha, the class on halacha of blessings. Say the brachas hanen, and we're up to chapter 10. And I welcome our new participant, Levi, is here joining our class. Welcome, Levi. Okay, so chapter 10, and hopefully we'll also cover chapter 11. Chapter 10 deals with the laws of kedima bebrachis, the order of precedence of blessings, which means everything in the laws of blessing, as we've seen in the first 9 chapters, is very precise, very nuanced, and very particular. This type of food, that type of food, you said a blessing, you had a mind, you didn't have a mind, is it an interruption, changing places, changing rooms? I mean, it's very, very detail oriented. And in particular, right, the Chachamim, when the mitzvah, when the rabbis instituted the mitzvah of saying blessings before and after we eat, it wasn't just like a general idea, general concept, hey, say blessings. But they had a mind to, down to the detail of exactly what type of food and what type of blessing and and everything in between. So, as well as the halacha of precedent in blessing, which means which blessings comes first. If you have 2 things in front of you, we have a piece of cake and you have a cup of Diet Coke, or you have 2 different types of cakes, you have different types of fruits, you have different foods. Is there a precedence? Is there a specific order? Or eat whatever you want. You want to have this, make a bracha and eat it. You want to have that, make a bracha and eat it. But we'll see in chapter 10 that very often there is a order, and the halacha tells us which food we should eat first. Interesting concept. The interesting concept, if I could just throw my own little thought on this, is that one of the ideas of kosher, right? That one of the concepts of kosher, obviously there's no reason given to kosher, but the Torah doesn't give us a reason, but there are many reasons given to it. One of the ideas is that when we eat, it's like our basic nourishment, our basic survival, right? We always have to eat, right? It's a staple, right? You can't go on, you can't live without eating. So the idea is that even something which seems to be very mundane, it's just like I'm just refueling, just eating to move on. It's also a mitzvah, right? I also always have to remember Hashem. And this I could eat, this I can't eat, this is kosher, this is not kosher. So it's not just like, hey, when I'm going to shul, when I'm being spiritual, when I'm davening, that's when I am connecting to the Eibush, to Hashem, that's what I'm doing holy endeavors. But then there's just my sleeping and eating and walking and whatever. That's just life. But the laws of kosher teach us that every area of life, even what seems to be the vital and just the survival mode, mundane areas of life, those are also part of my service to Hashem. But I think maybe the same idea, the same concept could be also applied to the idea of saying blessings. And even something like this, which blessing to say first? I'm eating. Okay, I'm eating kosher. It's kosher as a good hechsher. I prepared it properly, right? I went through everything. It's a kosher dish. It's a kosher food. But even here, no. Even how to eat it and what to eat first. Take a bite of this first, or take a bite of that first. Even that is a mitzvah. Which means even that, the Torah tells us how it should be done. So instead of looking at it as like, hey, this is very controlling, where's our freedom? Or the other way of looking at it is, what is this opportunity? Even in these small, seemingly insignificant details of our lives, it's also a mitzvah. We can also connect to Hashem even through that. That's my own thought. It does not say that inside over here. Okay, let's begin. So before we begin, just to lay out some general rules, some general principles. So in regards to Kedima Bebrachis, what's the order? What comes first in blessing? What do you have to eat first? So there are some concepts over here. One concept is chaviv. Chaviv means what is special in my eye. What is what is special to me. I enjoy it. It's chaviv to me. I favor it. So those things generally go up in the ladder, right? They take precedence because I enjoy it, right? So I'm eating two things of food. I have this cake and that cake, and I'm eating both of them. But I like this one a lot better. I like chocolate. I'm having two scoops of ice cream, right? I have chocolate and vanilla, and I like vanilla over chocolate. I like chocolate over, even though I'm eating both, because I generally like one over the other. That itself makes it more important, and therefore, in certain cases, that would be the bracha to say first. Another concept is the Shivas Haminim, the 7 species, right? So because certain fruits are part of the 7 species, and also certain grains of wheat and barley are from the 7 species, so that also makes it more important, and in certain scenarios that they will be first with the blessing. So let's start, and as always, the way the Alter Rebbe writes in the chapter in the Seder, sometimes it's like he says one thing, and then he qualifies it, and he qualifies it, and he qualifies it. Sometimes it's kind of hard to keep track of everything. We'll go through it a little bit. Maybe we'll skip around. We'll see how it goes. Just to lay out something that he says a little bit later is that this whole concept of precedence is only if you want to eat two things, right? So if I have two things on the table, I have a bowl of fruit, different types of fruit. So we'll learn which fruit comes first, which blessing I should make first. But this is only if I intend to eat from both of them. If I only have a mind to eat one of them, at least right now, I'm not interested in eating a grape now. Now I want to eat an orange. So even though maybe a grape is from the 7 species, but I'm not interested in eating a grape. So I don't have to eat it just because it's on the table. If I plan on eating both of them, so that we say, eat this before that, or at least make a blessing on before that. The reason why I'm saying this is because there's in Chabad and Lubavitch, we always look at the Rebbe and see what he does. We learn a lot from the way he acts, right? Things that he does and that he did. So one day a year, there was a big bowl of fruit on the Rebbe's table in public by a Farbrengen. When was that? Can you guess?
Tu B'Shvat?
Tu B'Shvat, yeah. So Tu B'Shvat. So there will be a Farbrengen. This is made in the 80s. The Rebbe would have a hold of Farbrengen, and they would have fruit because it's custom is to eat fruit. And the Rebbe would eat a fruit, like one fruit usually, right? And people were always like debate, like which fruit did the Rebbe take, and how does it fit with what it says over here? Is it right? And I think the obvious thing over here is that if you only intend to eat one fruit, so you get whichever fruit you want, that's fine, right? Because you're only having in mind that if you're having in mind to eat 2 fruits, then you got to figure out which one comes first. But if you don't intend to eat it, you don't have to eat it just because it's there in the bowl. Anyways, so it begins Halacha Aleph with 2 types of bread. 2 types of bread. And it kind of goes into great detail exactly what it's made of and how it, but we'll get the general concept over here. Okay, Halacha Aleph, we're chapter 10. Hiviu lefanav lachil. If pieces of bread and a whole loaf of bread were brought to a person, so he has a full loaf of bread and he has sliced bread. The optimum manner of observing the mitzvah is to recite the blessing on the whole loaf. You start always with this called the shlema, the complete loaf of bread. This rule applies even if the whole loaf is made from coarse flour and is small, and the pieces of bread are made from refined flour and are larger than the whole loaf, provided they are both from the same type of grain. So again, he already qualified this, right? We're talking about both in the same type of grain, but there's different types of flour. So there's whole wheat flour, there's this flour, right? That flour, right? Depending how refined the flour is. And I'm not sure which is considered a better flour back in the day, which was considered a better, the white bread or the whole wheat bread. You know the story where a couple, 98 years old, they both pass away. They go to heaven. They look at their record. Oh, you both have a great record. You did many mitzvahs. You go straight to heaven. So they're in heaven. They're in Gan Eden, and they're loving it. There's beautiful music. There's beautiful scenery. They have food galore. It's an amazing experience. Godliness, of course, right? It's like I said, it's heaven. So the wife turns to the husband and says, "No, Shmuel, tell me, how is it? How is it in heaven? You enjoying it?" He says, "Oh yeah, I'm enjoying it so much. If not for your whole wheat bread, I would have been here 20 years ago." Okay. Anyway, so whichever is, even if one is considered more refined than the other, we always go with the shlema, the complete loaf of bread. All right, so this is they're both the same bread, they're both made out of wheat. However, different types, it makes a difference whether there's refined wheat flour or not. We always go with the complete, with the shlema. If, however, the whole loaf is made from barley and the piece of bread are made from wheat, even if a slice is small, it is given precedence with regards to the recitation of the blessing. So here we have an interesting thing. If it's made out of, one is made out of wheat, so one made out of barley, so wheat comes first. Why does wheat come first? Because they're both from the 7 species, right? The wheat and barley. However, the rationale is that the species mentioned earlier in the verse, when the Torah mentions the 7 species, so the Torah says the land of wheat and barley. So I want you to just skip for a moment, or you can scroll down to Halacha 9. Over here we quote the entire verse. And that's why I asked you for the Chumash earlier. So I see it's quoted over here in Halacha 9, right? Just read it quickly, right? Within the 7 species themselves, there is an order of priority. The species mentioned earlier in the verse, a land of wheat, barley, vines, which is geffen, right? Figs and pomegranates, a land of olives, yielding oil, and honey. Honey over here, by the way, refers to dates. Yes, honey from dates. So it deserves precedence with regards to the recitation of blessing. So basically, in addition to anything that's part of the 7 species comes before anything that isn't part of the 7 species, within the 7 species itself, if it's earlier in the verse, it comes first. Now, we'll see later that's not only earlier in the verse, it's also earlier to the word eretz, which means land, which gets a little complicated because you have twice the land, right? The land of wheat and barley. So wheat and barley always comes first. Mizonos, hamotzi, they always come before fruits. But within grain itself, wheat has a precedence over barley because wheat comes first in the pasuk. And then within the 5 fruits, so actually olives and dates come before grapes and figs because they are closer to the word eretz, land, than the other one. You get that? Right? So that actually comes first, right? And then after olives and dates, do we have grapes, or grapes include also like raisins, and figs and pomegranates. Right? So pomegranates are really the last, even though it's not the last in the verse, but it's the furthest away from the word eretz, the word land. So it's like an interesting halacha. Either way. Welcome, Avram. Good to see you.
Good to see all of you.
Avram travels every week, almost an hour just to come to the class.
There you go. Baruch Hashem.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're discussing over here, if we have two types of bread, one is barley and one is wheat. Even if the barley is the complete loaf, but because the wheat is first in the pasuk, so we first make the hamaitzi on the bread of wheat.
What if you have old bread and then barley? What's ahead of then?
Oh, good question. We'll get to that in a second. We'll get that in a second. Now, however, nevertheless, a God-fearing person should satisfy both opinions by placing the slice within the whole loaf and slicing a piece from both at the same time. This course of action is followed because barley is also one of the 7 species for which I so with praise, and the loaf of barley bread is whole. But because it's from the 7 species and it's whole, so even though the wheat bread is first in the pasuk, but it's not complete, and we know that there's a strong emphasis in the Torah that when you make a bracha, when you make a blessing, and this is not just a blessing, but in general, we always try to do things completely. So we make a blessing, want to make a blessing over a complete fruit, a complete loaf of bread, right? We want to make sure it's complete. You know, on Shabbos, we'll have 2 complete loaves of bread, right? Specifically complete. So over here, if you have an option of 2 things of equal bread, right? One's sliced already, one's a full loaf. Unless you have no intention to open a new loaf, fine. But if you're anyways planning on opening the loaf, make it the blessing on it before you slice it, before you cut it, because it's complete. You find this also in other areas, like a Hanukkah, right? Some say this idea is you should always fill up the candle, fill up the whatever it's called, the glass with oil, because you want to be full. Now you don't necessarily, sometimes you don't want food to burn for 5 hours. But the point is, a cup of wine, right? We make kiddush, we fill up to the top, right? Or we overflow even, because everything in the mitzvah you want to do it complete, full. So too with the mitzvah, so with making a blessing as well. So because in this scenario, the barley full loaf, the barley bread is a full loaf, but the wheat loaf, the wheat is only a slice of bread. So the best thing to do is to eat them basically both together. Now, I'm not a big expert in different breads that you find today, but my understanding is that your regular loaf of bread you buy today is made out of wheat flour, right? And then you don't really buy a specialty bread, but the regular bread is wheat, right? That's why. So we're not going to go into such detail over here, because I think today a lot of these things are not so common to have different types of specialty breads made out of different types of flour. I just want to finish Halacha 1. If, however, the whole loaf is made from rye, even though it is a subspecies of barley, since it is not mentioned explicitly in the verse, there is no need at all to place the loaf made from it next to the sliced piece made from wheat. So this idea of what comes first, the barley or the wheat, is only talking about wheat and barley itself, not the other 3 grains, which are a subspecies, right? So you have oats, rye, and spelt, right? Spelt, right? So those 3 are like sub species of wheat and barley. So that doesn't really apply. It applies to wheat and barley itself. So Halacha 2 talks about what I mentioned earlier, that this is only referring in the case that you actually want to eat from it. If you don't want, then there's no reason, you don't need to eat it just because it's on the table. So we're going to skip now to Halacha 6. Like I mentioned, we can read the other halachas, but it talks about different types of flour, different types of bread that are made out of, and which ones comes first. You read it on your own. Halacha 6. Now we're going on to fruit. And when it comes to fruit, so we mentioned, like I mentioned already earlier, you have a complete fruit. You have the fruit that you like most chaviv, most special to you, and then you have the fruit of the 7 species. So how does this all play out? Halacha 6. The following rules apply when there are many types of fruits over which the same blessing is recited before a person, meaning they're all ha'etz, or they're all ha'adama, and they're all this now in front of you, and none of the fruits are from the 7 species, right? So again, if it's from the 7 species, that comes first. But if they're not from the 7 species, you have an apple, you have an orange, you have right, any other fruits. If the person prefers, and again, and you're planning on eating all of them. If you're not planning on eating all the fruit, then it's not a question. You want it, you're going to sit down and have now two or three fruits. So now, what do? Which one do you make first? If the person prefers one of the fruits more than the others, so if you have one which is chaviv, right, meaning you prefer one over the other, the optimal way of performing the mitzvah is to recite a blessing over the preferred fruit and cover the other fruits with its blessing. So you make ha'etz on one of them, and you cover the rest of them. Which one do you make ha'etz on? The one that you like, you prefer, the one that you like. I like oranges over apples, so you make a bracha on the orange. And then you eat the apple afterwards. Nevertheless, yeah.
I hate to disturb you, but since you have a higher status on the fruits of Eretz Yisrael, in other words, if you had an olive, wouldn't you want to make the bracha on olive before you made it on apple?
So again, if it's from the 7 species, we make this roll.
Right. You make that first, correct?
We'll see. Nothing so simple. Halacha 8. We'll get to the halacha 8.
Oh, okay.
Halacha 8 talks about, but yeah, the general rule is that if it's from the fruits of this roll, then we make it first. But we'll see that soon. It's qualified. We'll see that in halacha 8. But here we're talking about there's nothing from the fruits of Israel. So you don't have a date, you don't have a olive, you don't have a fig, you don't have a pomegranate, and you don't have a what's it called? A grape, right? It's just other fruits. It's fruits from Ram's backyard. You have any fruit trees here? No, not yet. So you choose the one which is chav. Now, again, qualifies that this only applies if they're all either complete or they are all cut up. But if some are cut and some are complete, then it's a different equation. So it continues, nevertheless, if the preferred fruit is not whole and the others are whole, then the optimum manner of performing the mitzvah is to recite the blessing on a whole fruit. So in other words, I guess a more straightforward way of saying it is if you have fruit which are not from the 7 species, first go to what is whole, what is complete. And that's what you make a bracha on it on first. If they're all whole or they're all incomplete, then which one do you prefer? You choose the one that you prefer, and then that's the one you make the bracha on. So that is if they all have the same bracha. They're all ha'etz, but they're all ha'adama. So you go what's complete, and then second goes what you prefer. Halacha 7 talks about what if some of them are ha'adama, some of them are ha'etz. Now, if you remember, I think it's all the way back in chapter 1. We spoke about this already, right? That what happens if you by mistake make ha'etz on ha'adama, right? So we said that l'chatchila, the best thing to do is always to make ha'etz before ha'adama. Right? So let's read this inside Halacha 7. If their blessings are not identical, then foods over which the blessing Bari Pri Ha'etz and Bari Pri Adama are recited are given precedence over foods of which the blessing Shahakol is recited, even if the latter is preferred more. So the Ha'etz and Adama, which means fruits of the ground or the tree, come before Shahakol. So anything, if you have any other food, candy or fish or eggs or meat that are Shahakol, first you make Ha'etz or Adama before the shahakol, even if you prefer to eat the shahakol. I like a piece of steak more than I like a almond. But because the almond is ha'etz, it comes before the piece of steak. Believe it or not. Different rules apply with regards to preference between foods over which the blessings Bari Pri Ha'etz and Bari Pri Adama are recited. If one would like to partake of 2 foods, one over which the blessing Bari Pri Ha'etz is recited, and one over which the blessing Bari Pri Adama is recited, and he prefers to the food over which the blessing Bari Pri Adama is recited, he must recite the blessing over the food first, that food first. If one likes them both equally, it is desirable to recite the blessing Bari Pri Ha'etz first, even though there is no defined obligation to do so. Okay, so basically it's like this. When it comes to fruit and non-fruit, meaning ha'etz hadama and shahakro, ha'etz hadama always comes first. Even if the other is preferred, right? Ha'etz hadama comes first. If we're talking about ha'etz hadama itself, I have a cucumber and an apple. I'm planning on eating both.
Right.
Or I have a fruit salad, right? This is a very common case. I have a fruit salad. And the fruit salad, some fruit are hadama, some fruit are eitz, and it's not like there's one mixture where we make one bracha. It's like very piecey, where it's like kind of all separate. So I make two separate blessings. So what do I say first? The ha'etz or the hadama?
Right.
So if I really prefer eating the hadama fruit, I really like the watermelon over the mango, right? I like watermelon. So I'm eating both, but I make hadama first. And I have a mind that it should not cover the ha'etz, right? And then make ha'etz afterwards. If all is equal, we always make ha'etz. We try to make ha'etz first. There's no obligation to make ha'etz first, but we make ha'etz first. Right? That makes sense? We follow that, right? So within hadama and ha'etz, either we go what's preferred, so which could be a hadama. If all is equal, we make ha'etz first. Now we get to Avram's situation. What if there's also a olive in the mix? There's a grape in the mix. There's a raisin in the mix, right? So what do? If the above situation is if there were fruits from the 7 species from which Yisrael is praised among the fruits, and their blessings are the same as those with the other fruits. For example, figs and grapes and apples. So the same blessing. The both are all ha'etz. Some are from the 7 species, some aren't. One should recite the blessing over the fruit from the 7 species and cover the rest. This rule applies even when there was only a half of the fruit from the 7 species, while the other fruits were whole. Right? Which we mentioned earlier. Whole comes first. So the same way we said it with bread, I believe the same thing is fruit as well. If something is complete, that bracha comes first. However, when it comes to 7 species, that overrides. 7 species come before, even if it's incomplete, only a sliced grape comes before a complete apple. However, again, we still have to qualify everything here. If, however, one prefers the other fruits, he may recite the blessing on whichever fruit he wishes.
Even if you plan on eating.
So basically, there are 2 things which have equal precedence, equal weight, equal status. The equal status is over here in regards to fruit of 7 species and chaviv, preferred. What comes first? I prefer the apple, but the grape is from the 7 species. So what do I do first? So here he says equal weight, and I can decide. Either one is fine. Either one is fine. If there's no preference, then I go 7 species. 7 species comes even before complete. Okay, so you got to always keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. Is it complete? Is it incomplete? Is it 7 species? Is it preferred? Right. So this is an equal weight. Okay, but this is all if they have the same blessing. However, when the blessings over the foods are not the same, and thus it is necessary to recite blessing over both of them. For example, figs, grapes, and raisins, and types of kitnias, which are ha'adama. When one likes both equally, the law permits reciting a blessing first on whichever one the person desires more. So again, over here, preferred 7 species, either one. You can decide. You want to make a bracha ha'etz on the 7 species. You want to make ha'adama on what you prefer better. Either one is fine. It is, however, preferable to recite the blessing before the blessing ha'adama. However, like we mentioned earlier, always, whenever you have ha'etz and ha'adama, ha'etz always takes precedence. So it's better to do ha'etz first. Meaning, in regards to the laws of the order of precedence, they have equal weight. So you can make ha'adama if you prefer the fruit of ha'adama, or you can make ha'etz if you because of the 7 species. However, generally, it's always better to make ha'etz. If all is equal, it's better to make ha'etz before ha'adama. If, however, one prefers a food which is not from the 7 species, for which I saw as praise, he should give it precedence. And recite the blessing over it, even though a blessing is very feared up. So here's something interesting. Here, I'm just noticing this now as I'm learning it with you. Here, it's like this. When it comes to Hadama, it's a little bit different than when it comes to 2 fruits of ha'etz. 2 fruits of ha'etz, we say it's both equal weight, right? If you prefer one and one's a 7 species, either one you can make the blessing. But when it comes to here, it's something like this. If they're both of equal preference, then you go with either one. You go with either one, right? However, if you prefer the Hadama, then you should make Hadama first. Right? That's what it says here. He should give it precedence and recite the blessing over it, and even though its blessing is very pure. So with Hadama, I see in the commentary it goes the length of the explanation for the reason for it. But Hadama comes first when it's preferred. If they're both ha'etz, then preferred doesn't make it come first. It just allows you to choose whichever one you want. If it's one's ha'etz, one's Hadama, and you prefer the Hadama, then you make the Hadama first.
Do you necessarily have to cover the other fruit when you make?
Well, you can have a mind, but the chatchila is better not to have a mind. Chatchila, when you make Hadama, it's better to have a mind that is not covering any other fruit.
Of a different bracha. Right.
Of the ha'etz. Yeah.
Rabbi Mendel, I have a question. So say when you're teaching small children, do you just choose to do ha'etz all the time with them, like, and go down the list because they're just learning? Is it better to just say we're going to do ha'etz, ha'adama, and then?
Yeah, generally ha'etz comes first. But yeah, if you're teaching children, you always choose the ha'etz first. First, mizonos comes first, then ha'etz, then ha'adama, then shakol.
Even if I'm teaching them and the species are in there?
Well, most of the species are ha'etz, or all the species are ha'etz.
Yeah. Okay.
The only time you wouldn't make a bracha on the 7 species, I mean, you would make it on Hadama, is if you really prefer eating the Hadama more than you prefer eating the 7 species. So that, for children, I would just say make the ha'etz on the 7 species. Yeah.
Okay. But could I ask you, on these granola bars that are Nature Valley granola bars that have oats in them, what bracha would be made?
So we make Hadama on the granola bars.
Okay, because a lot of times I was doing mazonis and I just found out that it was hadama.
Right. The reason why it should be Hadama is because the oats are not ground; they're not made into flour. The only time you make a mizonos is when the grain is made into flour, mixed with water, or mixed with liquid, and baked or fried. Okay. But when it's just complete whole oats or whole any other grain, right? Whole barley would be the same thing, by the way.
Right.
Barley barley is not mezainis. Barley would be hadama.
Right.
Unless it's made into a flour.
Okay.
We spoke about this earlier. It's like really mushed together, whatever. It goes into great detail. But basically, oats bars are considered generally hadama.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. Halacha test we already mentioned earlier about within the 7 species itself. We always go, within that pasuk, whichever fruits are closer to the word eretz, So obviously the grain comes first, wheat and barley, and then instead of going to the geffen, which is the vines, we actually skip to the olive. Then we have the date. Then we go back to the grape, to the fig, and then to the pomegranate, right? However, if there's one of the other fruit that are more, you prefer to eat the other one, then you could also go out of order. However, when it comes to mezainis always comes first, even if you prefer eating the fruit. But if you're planning on also eating the bread or the mezonos, you always make the mezonos first. And this is only if you're actually making a mezonos on it, right? If you're eating a granola bar, then you don't have to make that first because it's hadam. So even though it's oats, or even if it was actual barley or wheat, it only applied when it's actually eaten as mezonos, made into flour, etc.
Right.
I want to skip here to Halacha 13 Yud Gimel. Dates should be given precedence over grapes and raisins, right? Because dates come first, are closer to the word eretz in the pasuk, even though it's actually the last in the pasuk. And dvash, the honey is referring to the honey of dates, but it's closer to the word eretz, right? We said that, right? So that comes before anovim, before grapes and raisins. However, if I take wine, which wine is seemingly just, what is it? It's grapes, right? But wine, however, should be given precedence over olives, even when one prefers the olives. The reason is that the blessing Bari Pri Hagafen is the most prestigious of all blessings, except for the blessing of Bari Pri Mezainis, whether the latter is recited over wheat products or barley products. This blessing should be given precedence over the blessing Bari Pri Hagafen, even when one prefers the wine. So the mezainis always comes first, but after mezainis, a wine comes first. So hagafen, this is interesting over here, right? So I have a glass of wine, I have grapes, and I have dates on the table. Okay, so what comes first?
Wine.
What comes first? So wine comes first, but not the grapes. Wine, then dates, then grapes.
In the order of the puzzle.
Because it's in the order of what comes closer to the word eretz. So even though grapes and wine seemingly are the same thing, wine takes precedence because it's hagafen, it's special. So wine comes first, after mezainis. Then we go to the order of the pasuk, so we go to the dates, and then we go to the grapes. However, if I like grapes more than I like dates, again I could make make ha'etz on the grapes and not on the dates. Okay. We said already, mezainis and hamaitzi, of course, always come before any other things, even before olives and wine. Here's an interesting halacha in 15. When we say preferred, we don't necessarily mean that right now, this is what I want. Oh, I have a craving for this. Preferred means I generally like this. If you ask me, what do you prefer? Which food do you like better? Which food do you like better? This is generally what I like. Maybe at this moment, it's all equal. But generally, I like this first. That's already enough to be considered preferred. And also vice versa. If I usually it's equal, but right now I want this. Also, and that is already considered preferred. And the final halacha in 16 tells us that all these halacha of precedence is only it's only if they're both here, right, ready to be eaten. But if it's like, hey, we have this on the table, and I'm bringing out the real goodies, which I really like, but right now it's not at the table, I don't have to wait. Say, oh, I want to make a blessing because I really like that more than I like this. No, whatever's on the table and you're ready to eat now, you don't have to wait for other foods to come. So that is the conclusion of chapter 10. What time is it?
It's 10:16.
The conclusion of that chapter 10. And this is really, essentially, the conclusion of the laws of blessings on food. Chapter 11, 12, and 13 deal with other blessings that we have to make in our Jewish life. So in regards to food, I think we pretty much covered. Obviously, we skipped a little bit here and there, but we pretty much covered the laws of food, different blessings of fruits and vegetables and mizonos. We had a long discussion, and wine and oil and different places. If you left the middle, if you had a mind, if we all these halachas, I think we covered pretty much everything. Obviously, lots of detail and lots of things to remember. And I know with myself, I studied this numerous times in my life in yeshiva, and since then, I always have to review it. And even now, when we're studying with you, a lot of new things come to mind, because it's a lot to remember. It's really a lot to remember, and we try to simplify it here a little bit, but sometimes it gets kind of complicated and kind of confusing. I want to just go through quickly chapter 11. And then next week, I hope to be able to conclude chapter 12 and 13, which will be the conclusion of this. And the week after that, we could study some of the laws of Rosh Hashanah. The week after that is going to be Rosh Hashanah, so we'll have to skip. And then the week after that will be before Yom Kippur. So we should be able to study some of Yom Kippur, maybe also have some time for Sukkot. Because the week after that is Rosh Hashanah itself. Sukkot itself is Monday night also. We're not going to be able to have any Monday nights before Sukkot other than the Monday night before Yom Kippur and Sukkot. Whatever. So then maybe after Sukkot we'll start a new series, a new subject. Anyway, so Halacha Perek Yud Aleph deals with the laws of Reach, fragrance, odor, smell. Right? When we smell something has a good odor, has a good fragrance, we have to make a blessing. Right? We know on Havdalah, right? Most famously, every week during the Havdalah service, what do we say? And we smell some spices, something good, something nice. So that is the halacha of those things. Is the halacha, the laws of this mitzvah is in Perek Aleph, and as well also the blessing of Shechiyah. Now the truth is, it's important to know some of the halachas of reach, of fragrance. But however, we're also going to skip a lot of it because a lot of it goes into the details of different types of spices. Which and the truth is, it's not so well known. There are different types of blessings. We say the blessing "Berde Mine B'Samim," right? You familiar with that blessing? The blessing of different types of insects, incense. I'm sorry, B'Samim, right? So this is almost like the shahakol blessing that covers everything, right? But the truth is, there are different types of blessings within B'Samim itself. Atzi B'Samim, Isvei B'Samim, and I may be wrong. Growing up, I've never really heard other people making different blessings. We kind of always just do the mini B'Samim. So that's why I'm not going to go into great detail of the different types of B'Samim, but obviously it's there and we should study it as well. Well, let's start with Halacha 1. The blessing recited over a pleasant fragrance must be recited before one begins to smell it. Just as a blessing over food is recited before one tastes it, because it is forbidden to derive satisfaction from this world without reciting a blessing. So the same way we have satisfaction of consuming food, we have to make a blessing. So too the satisfaction of the pleasure of this smell, this fragrance, this pleasant fragrance, we also have to make a blessing before we have this pleasure, the satisfaction. Which blessing are recited on fragrances? If the pleasant fragrance comes from a species of herbs, one should recite the blessing by the Isvei B'Samim, which praises God who created fragrant herbs. The ayin of Isvei should be enunciated with a chirik. Okay, that's just telling us in Hebrew how to pronounce it. As in the phrase, Mishlei Isvais Harim, herbs are mountains. If the fragrance comes from a species of tree, then we say Bredi Atse B'Samim, the creative fragrance from trees. Okay.
Can I ask you a question then?
Wait a second. I want us to skip to halacha 5. Okay, the blessing buried in mini v'samim should be recited over fragrances which do not emerge from either a tree or an herb. For example, musk. This substance is extracted from a gland in the neck of a known wild animal, where a blood-like substance first collects. I'm not sure what this is. You know what this is? You do know what it is? Okay, but it's not okay. So it then dries in a musk, and musk it produces is produced from it. It is forbidden. Skip a little bit over here.
Like whale oil or some perfume?
Okay. Any other form, exactly, right? So what blessing do we make over this? We here looking at the side. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So the blessing of Brady Mine B'Samim is recited over this. Right? So we see over here, we have a third blessing. We have Brady Isve B'Samim for herbs. You have Brady Atse B'Samim. Atse means tree, wood, tree. And then you have Brady Mine B'Samim, which basically is like everything else. Right? So the minute v'samim is almost like I said, like the shahako, which covers everything. So I'm not, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a rav, I'm not a rabbi that the paskins, but it seems like our custom is that we just make for the minute v'samim on pretty much everything, because it says anytime that there is a doubt and we're not sure what blessing we should make, we always make a birthday mine v'samim. Okay, Avram, you had a question.
Well, you just answered it really, because sometimes you may be walking down a street and you smell like at nighttime the sweet olive tree puts out a perfume. So would you say, if you smelled it first, would you say the bracha?
Oh, great question. So it deals with this. It deals with this, but I don't want to say anything without looking it up clearly inside. Basically, if it's just my understanding is that if you just walk through and you don't have a mind to smell, it's not there for the fragrance, it's just there, then you don't make the blessing. You only make the blessing if you're actually intending. Your intention is, yes, I'm coming here, I'm smelling. Wow, smells so good. Then I make the blessing.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Walk by a good bakery, whatever. You don't make the blessing of vitamin sun. Now, there's also a fourth category is the fragrance from fruits. Actually, it's actually separate, right? It's not tree, it's not herbs. It's actually a fruit. So there's actually a different blessing that we make for this. And if you jump back to Halacha 3, if fragrance comes from a fruit which is fit to eat, whether it's one that grows on the tree like an apple or an esrog, right? On Sukkot we have an esrog, or one that grows from the earth, the blessing Baruch Atah Hashem, Asher Nasan Reyach Tov Baperos. It's a whole different blessing. Blessed are you, God our Lord, who endowed fruits and with pleasant fragrance, which should be recited over its fragrance. Right? So it's a different blessing. Now, it says clearly, if one took a fruit in his hand intending only to eat it, and its fragrance wafted to his nose on its own, as it were, a blessing should not be recited over the fragrance. The rationale is that he did not take the fruit in his hand so that the fragrance would reach his nose. Rather, he only picked it up in order to eat it. Right? So, for these things, we do not make a blessing. So I think the same thing applies to what Abraham is saying. You walk in the store, or whatever, you smell it, you don't make a blessing for that because you had no intention to enjoy that smell.
You say that bracha only when the fruit is fresh.
Let's ask the question. Oil. Yeah, a lemon oil would be something which is there for the smell, right? It's there for the odor, right? Yeah, yeah. So then that would be something that you make in Bode Mine Vesamim. We'll get to that in a second in Halacha 6. Yeah, Yishai.
So you only make that. So you only make that special bracha when the fruit is fresh, because I've heard if you keep an esrog and if you keep your esrog forever or for whatever reason you say atse v'samim.
Atze? Why atze?
It's from a tree.
Yeah, but atze is the tree itself. Something that comes from the tree itself.
That's I just remember asking a Rav, and that's what he told me.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. We'll continue in Halacha 3. Some authorities maintain that one should recite the blessing Asher Nasan Reach Toiv Ba'Peiros even over the fragrance from produce that is fit to be eaten only when mixed with other foods if the produce is primarily prepared to be used in this manner. For example, cinnamon or cloves, which are prepared to be used as spices for cooked food. So today, I think many people use cloves or cinnamon for besamim. So this opinion says that even though you can't eat these fruits on their own, only when they are prepared, but because this is usually why they're planted, this is the use of it, in order to mix it with other things and to prepare it to be used, therefore we still make the special blessing of the fragrance of fruit. And we don't make a regular bite of meat. However, other authorities differ and maintain that the blessing of B'rei Atzei V'samim is recited over them, since they are not fit to be eaten by themselves. Okay, I'm sorry, Yishai, seems to be what you're saying. That once the fruit is not in a state of they cannot be eaten as is, perhaps the second opinion would be applied to the old esrog that cannot be eaten, just like the cinnamon and the cloves that cannot be eaten on its own. So we don't make the special blessing because it's not a fruit. You make atzei for some. Right. However, what does Alter Rebbe say? Which because of this doubt, we're not sure which blessing to make. We make a atzei v'samim or a the special one for fruit. Because of this doubt, in this instance, one should recite the blessing B'rei Minei V'samim. Again, like the Shaka, right? B'rei Minei V'samim, which covers all kinds of fragrances, and with which, after the fact, one fulfills his obligation to recite a blessing over all types of pleasant fragrances.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, when one is in doubt whether a fragrant plant is considered a tree or an herb, he should recite the blessing over its fragrance. I think this is the reason why today this is like the most common blessing we make, because first of all, anytime we're in doubt, we make and then whenever there's a dispute, whether we make this blessing or that blessing, we make the B'rei Minei V'samim. So I guess there we have it. Yishai, thank you for pointing that out. I guess the same thing would apply if you have a fruit that was edible, but now it's not anymore. So perhaps this will be the same machlok, it's the same two opinions, whether you make the B'rei Atzei V'samim or B'rei, maybe over here everyone will say you make a B'rei Atzei V'samim, because here you're not even doing anything to make it edible, right? It's still not edible. So you make a B'rei Atzei V'samim. Good point. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Does it cover like let's say you have a bourbon or whiskey, and you go to smell, or even wine, smell?
No. We'll get to that in Halacha 8, okay? Now we're going to Halacha 6, what Colette was talking about oil. The following rules apply to oil which has been scented with spices. If there is some of the actual substance of the spice in the oil, the blessing for the spice should be recited over the scented oil. If one strained all of the spice from the oil, leaving only the fragrance absorbed in the oil, there are authorities who maintain that the blessing bread in Minivasam should be recited, weight should be given to their words. Therefore, that the liquid extracted from the spice has the same status as the substance of the spice itself. According to all opinions, the blessing for the spice is recited over the liquid. Similarly, the blessing bread should be recited on the fragrance sap, which drips from trees like frankincense and gum mastic. Okay, again, this is all going into different types of blessings. And again, I think we, at least I know that with myself, we always say, but maybe it's wrong. Maybe we should say the specific blessing of the different types of fragrances. Halacha 8. This is, I think, touching upon what David was saying. One should recite a blessing over a pleasant fragrance only when it was made to be smelled. In contrast, a blessing should not be recited over the fragrance from incense that was placed in censer to scent garments. Basically, if it wasn't meant that we should smell this, it's only here that it should bring a good smell to something else. The spray in the garments, or see if there's a bad odor, like a bathroom, whatever it's called, right? So refresher, right? It's not there. It's only to take away a bad smell or a different smell, or to bring a smell to something else. Not that this itself should have a good smell. So then we don't make a blessing on that smell. The rationale is that the incense was not kindled to be smelled itself, but to scent the garments. Needless to say, a blessing is not recited over incense kindled in the house to remove an unpleasant odor. This ruling even applies to the spices which a delicate person takes with him to the toilet to negate the foul odor present there, even if he smells them when he is not in the toilet. The rationale is that these spices are not prepared to be smelled themselves and for their fragrance to be enjoyed, but only to remove an unpleasant odor. So therefore, we don't make a blessing on these things. Now, here's an interesting discussion in regards to smelling a esrog on sukkahs. Growing up, I always knew, before I learned this, that we don't smell the esrog. On sukkahs, you don't do it. Now, because in Lubavitch, we have a strong emphasis on mitzvah, right? You know what mitzvah is, to go out and to offer other Jews to do a mitzvah. So on sukkahs, of course, we go around with our lulav and esrog, and we ask people, hey, you Jewish, do you want to make a blessing and shake the lulav and esrog, right? And almost always, especially like the Sfardim, they take the esrog and they give it a smell. Now, I always used to think, wait, I always thought we're not supposed to do this. We're not supposed to smell the esrog. But then I'm thinking, well, why not? What's wrong with smelling it? It's a beautiful odor. It has a beautiful, beautiful smell. What's wrong with smelling the esrog? So I came across here. It tells us exactly the different opinions about whether we do make a blessing when we smell the esrog, or whether we don't make a blessing. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says the best thing is just don't smell it.
Don't smell it because you won't have to
Don't
make
smell it because of this. There's a dispute about whether there's an obligation to make a blessing when we smell the esrog. Okay. Following this reason, there are authorities who maintain that one who smells an esrog, which is being used for the mitzvah, meaning during the week of Sukkot, should not recite a blessing on its fragrance throughout the 7 days of the Sukkot festival. Although it is permitted to smell the esrog, it was not designated to be smelled, but rather to be taken for the mitzvah. When you bought the esrog, you spent $100, $200 on the esrog, right? You didn't have in mind, oh, I need an esrog that's going to bring a good fragrance, a good smell to my kitchen, right? That's not why you bought it. You bought it for the mitzvah. So if you bought it for the mitzvah, so yeah, you can smell it from today till tomorrow, but don't make a blessing on it, because like we said, it's not here. It wasn't bought. It wasn't brought to my house in order to have a good smell.
Yeah,
it does not resemble an esrog at any other time of the year or other kind of fruits which are designated to be eaten. Even though these fruits are primarily designated to be eaten, it is nevertheless also common to smell them while eating them. Hence, they can be considered as being designed to be smelled, right? Other fruits that have a good fragrance, like for example, right? If I cinnamon, right? So cinnamon, you use it for the spice, but also for the smell, right? It has a smell, and then you go back past a bakery. Sometimes you'll have like they'll even like spray sometimes like the cinnamon smell because it's like cinnamon, right? So cinnamon bun, right? So it's the taste, but it's also the smell. So even though it's there for eating primarily, but it's also for its fragrance, for its smell. However, the esrog is only for the mitzvah, right? That's why we're buying it. Yeah, it also has a smell. That's not why we're buying it. It's only for the mitzvah. So therefore, this opinion tells us we should not make a blessing. Other authorities maintain that even during the 7 days of the Sukkot festival, since it is permitted to smell an esrog, it is considered as designated to be smelled, just like it is throughout the year. Some authorities say no, they don't differentiate. They say, listen, at the end of the day, it's permitted. Sometimes you so it's just like any fruit that you buy to eat, but you also have a good smell. Since there is a difference in opinion concerning the matter, so what does the Alter Rebbe tell us? It is preferable to refrain from smelling an esrog throughout the festival, so that one will not enter a situation where there is a question regarding whether or not to recite the blessing. That's the answer.
Isn't it the case that like for a carbon, like let's say you had a bowl that you were bringing a carbon, you can't put your luggage to.
You can't use it. You can't use this. That's something that's designated for a mitzvah. So for the Beis Hamikdash, we don't use it for our personal use. So here he doesn't mention that you shouldn't use it because at the end of the day, what are you using? You're not doing anything to the esrog itself. You're not playing ball with it, right? You're just enjoying the smell of the esrog, right? So you're enjoying the mitzvah, right? But it doesn't say you can't have any benefit from esrog, right?
Having the smell, that's not a problem, right?
No, of course not. Like we said, if you happen to smell it, even during the year, you don't make a blessing, right? You only make a blessing when you intend to smell, right? But because of this, that's why. However, obviously, this is what the Alter Rebbe writes over here. But there are many opinions, obviously, that say that you could smell them, right? So obviously, that's why you'll find many other Jews or religious Jews who do smell the esrog, and either they make the blessing or they don't make the blessing, depending on which opinion they're following. But it's definitely there. Now, which blessing do you make? Seemingly, you could make a burden minei b'samim if you do make a blessing on smelling the esrog. Minei b'samim covers everything, but really, you should really make the blessing that you make on fruit, which is shenasan reach toiv. The Peiros that Hashem gave a special blessing, a special fragrance to fruit. Let's just conclude over here. It is, however, forbidden to smell the myrtle, the myrtle throughout the festival, according to the law, as explained in Halacha Class, which is a separate discussion. If I don't remember offhand exactly, but perhaps because it may fall. I'm not sure the reason it is, but that is a separate discussion. Okay.
Too has a very good
Yeah. Halacha tests. Different spices. Could we use them as besamim? Similarly, there are authorities who maintain that even if one derives pleasure from the fragrance of crushed peppercorns or ginger, he should not recite a blessing when smelling them. The rationale is that they are prepared only to serve as seasoning for food, and it is not very common to smell them. So again, when sometimes you're stuck, Rosh Hashanah, Matzah Shabbos, you're making Havdalah, and you don't have cloves, you don't have cinnamon. You have to make something, right? What should I smell, right? Yeah, I'll open the pantry, take any spice, and I'll smell them, right? So you have to really know, well, how common is it to smell these? When you're putting pepper in your salad or in your food, you're doing it for the taste or also for the smell. If it's only for the taste or generally, then you can't use this as something. So, for example, he uses pepper and ginger. Those two examples he brings over here, that we don't use it for the smell, we use it for the taste, and therefore you can't make a bracha on it. Hence, they are not at all considered to be designated for smelling. This logic does not apply regarding cinnamon and cloves, like I mentioned earlier, which are commonly used for fragrance, even when one is not eating dishes spiced with them. Indeed, when they are added to a cooked dish, one intends also for them to produce an aroma. Right? So it's interesting.
Can you use like an orange peel as the spice for hot dog?
I don't know. I mean, like orange peels are usually. I'm not saying that no one ever uses it for the fragrance, but it's there to eat. And do we benefit from the smell of it?
Essential oil.
So essential oil, I think we mentioned earlier, we could. Yeah, especially if it's something again. The question really is.
Would you like some more?
No, that's fine. I like to drink with it. It's taco. It's fine. The question is essential oil. There's an oil that is meant for this fragrance. It's meant for the smell, right? You smell it. It comes in a little bottle, right? It's like a perfume. It's a perfume almost, right? But these things, of course, right? This is what it's meant for. This is what it's meant for. There are other authorities who disagree and maintain that one should recite a blessing when smelling crushed peppers and ginger. Hence, it is proper to refrain from smelling them. Similarly, one should refrain from smelling warm bread. If it has a pleasant fragrance. Since there's a difference of opinion regarding whether blessings should be recited over its fragrance, if in that way one will protect oneself from entering a situation where there's a question whether whether or not a blessing is required. So, for another example, is in like fresh bread. Oh, what? You came home from school, you baked yourself a challah. Wow, let me smell it. Well, maybe you shouldn't smell it because you have to make a blessing. On the one hand, it's a beautiful fragrance. On the other hand, it's bread. You didn't bake it in order for the smell. So maybe you should not. So because there's different opinions whether you have to make a blessing or not, therefore you should refrain from smelling them. Same thing applies. What happens if I walk into a spice shop? Oh, it smells so good, right? Do I make a blessing? So similar situation, right? If it's placed in a place, in a store, if it's placed in a place like in a pantry somewhere where it's not really, it's just stored away, then you walk into the pantry, you don't make a blessing. But if it's placed in a store where people are meant to walk in and you're meant to smell it because it's supposed to be draw you in, right? Oh, I love the smell. Then, if you're going there and you're enjoying the smell, then you could make a blessing.
Well, what about artificial scents?
That's exactly what I was about to ask, Bishai. How?
What's artificial scent?
Like a candle.
Like cologne
What's
or
made out?
Axe body
What's made out?
spray.
Right. So look halacha, maybe it's going to be answered with halacha 11. There are authorities who maintain that one should not recite a blessing over a pleasant fragrance that does not emanate from a fragrant substance. For example, the fragrance of scented clothing. Weight should be given to their words, and one should avoid smelling such objects because of the doubt. All authorities, however, agree that a blessing should not be recited when smelling a container that was used to hold spices and absorb their fragrance. The rationale is that the spices were not placed in the container with the intent to absorb the spices fragrance. So I'm not sure if how this applies to artificial sense, but the idea is that there has to be something there. It has to be a substance that you're smelling.
Real thing.
Like a real thing, right? So like, I'm not sure, like a candle, what?
A real mint herb versus fake, like doesn't even dry, like artificial vanilla versus real vanilla.
Well, what is artificial vanilla?
It's like derived from soaking in like oak planks or something like that.
So I don't know if I'm not sure if that's also substance. What's the difference if it's what's the difference in what name it has? So we're calling it vanilla, but it's really something. It's something, right? It's giving us right here. Like the example it brought is like you have a container that had within it spice, but now it's empty. So obviously there's something there because it's giving off an odor, or giving off a smell.
Cologne bottle that's empty.
Exactly, an empty cologne bottle. It still has this still has a smell. I'm thinking maybe a candle because I'm not sure what.
Yeah, because selecting deodorant or something, you don't even want to see if you like it.
It's a good question. If you're
It's quite a commitment.
yeah. So here, so the example here is like the fragrance scented of clothing, meaning I sprayed something on the clothing and now I'm smelling it. Like if I sprayed in the ear and then I smelled, I'm not sure if that you make a blessing on, because there's no substance anymore. It's just like in the ear. If I'm smelling the bottle, it's something else. You know.
Mhm.
No, like open up a bottle. Does this cover also like opening a bottle of wine or something, smelling it or something?
So again, wine, no, because the wine is not really meant. Although you know the 5 S's, right? You're supposed to smell the wine before you before you drink it. But wine is, I can't say, wine probably is like one of these things where like, it's not meant for the smell. Yeah, the smell, you drink wine, right? It's not there for the smell. So that's probably why you don't have to make a blessing. Now the question is, if you're smelling, let's say, deodorant and the perfume, just to know which one to buy. So you're not really there to really enjoy, right? You're not there to enjoy the smell of it. You're just there to figure out which one you want to buy. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you have to make a blessing or not. Good question.
That would come like a shed alcohol if you're just gonna do a round of smelling deodorants.
Minute, yeah. Make one minute of samim, and then you go out.
I guess like if you're picking out perfume, maybe.
So here it says that you don't make any blessing on any spray. Any spray, because because it's meant. I mean, once you spray it, it's already in the ear, so there's no substance anymore. So you don't make a blessing on any spray, deodorant, perfume, anything like that, or any type of thing that you spray. Also interesting, it says here that you don't make a blessing on like the what's it called, tabak, snuff, right? Because it evidently it itself has no natural smell. It's only when you take these herbs, you mix it with other things, it becomes something that has this deep, odor, the deep smell, fragrance. So that's why you don't make a blessing over it. I think we're going to conclude over here, even though I was not able to finish chapter 11, but the end of the chapter from Halacha 12 and on, we deal with the laws of Shehecheyanu. And the truth is, it kind of continues on to next chapter. Also, chapter 12 deals with the Shehecheyanu as well. So I guess we'll leave it from here. Continue next week with the laws of Shehecheyanu, the laws of blessing of Hatov V'Hametiv, when things good happen to us, the blessing of Baruch Dayan HaEmes, when seemingly bad things happen to us, the blessing that we make. And the final chapter, chapter 13, talks about the blessings that we make when something good happens, like a miracle happens to us. So different blessings that we make, and talk about other interesting blessings that when we see a king, or when we see many Jews together, or when we see someone haven't seen in a long time. Or we talked about the blessing that we make on lightning and thunder, things like that. So that is all next week. Hopefully we make a siyum. Siyum is the conclusion of the Seder. Join us. Join us next week.
On lightning and thunder and all, that's something you already experienced after the fact.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. That's one of those blessings that we make after the fact. So hopefully we'll have time to discuss all of this next week.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Appreciate it.